Hey y'all, Confusing here. I figured I would get a head start on this whole Scott the Woz arc and abandon the Saul Goodman one. And what better way to relax before beginning this absolutely huge step in my life? Let's watch some British sitcoms.
Heil, honey.
Heil, honey.
Heil, honey.
Heil, honey.
Heil, honey.
Hello.
I'm home. Heil, honey.
Oh shit, sounds like the UK police, the Germans, and Jewish people are angry at me for watching this. What else is on?
He's the president in residence, he's kind of in charge. He's got the whole country saying, that's my Bush.
Okay. Sitcoms based upon highly controversial figures and political figures. Wow, try saying that 3 times fast. It's a very niche subgenre of sitcoms. The only shows I could find or think of were Heil Honey I'm Home, That's My Bush, 1600 Pen, and The President's Show, and I'm only talking about live action sitcoms, not animated. So Lil Bush and our cartoon president don't count in this case, and neither does The West Wing for obvious reasons. Is that Martin Sheen? So let's talk about That's My Bush. It all began sometime around before the 2000 presidential election between candidates former Vice President Al Gore and Texas Governor George W. Bush. South Park creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone had conceptualized an idea to write and create a sitcom about the president, but make it the actual sitting president. According to them, they were about 95% sure that former Vice President Al Gore would win the 2000 election, and began conceptualizing a series with the name Everybody Loves Al. However, once results came in and George W. Bush was named president, it was given the name That's My Bush. According to them, the core idea would not have been that entirely different, because their whole point was basically, let's just make the most stereotypical 70s or 80s sitcom alive. But it involves the sitting president of the United States. Oh, and let's make him a lovable oaf. They also never had the intention of making a show mocking the president or politics, more just making fun of sitcoms. The biggest inspiration for both Trey and Matt would be the 70s British sitcom Fawlty Towers. The writing process was also quite innovative. Apparently, the show's writers would use a big dry erase board and on one side, write down political ideas such as abortion, gun control, the death penalty, etc. And on the other side, write more sitcom-y storylines, visits from old friends, being trapped together, mishearing something which leads to a wildly incorrect conclusion, etc. With that, a cocktail of experimentation was evident. That's My Bush stars Timothy Bottoms as George W. Bush, Carrie Quinn Dolan as First Lady Laura Bush, Kurt Fuller as Chief of Staff Karl Rove, Marcia Wallace as a stereotypical sassy sitcom maid Maggie, Krista Miller as Princess Stevenson. Yeah, so Comedy Central wouldn't allow them to include the Bush twins, Jenna and Barbara, so to get around this, they combined them into one character. And finally, John DeCino as George's next-door neighbor, Larry. Ironically enough, he'd go on to star as the president in everyone's favorite Cory in the Motherfucking House. The pilot episode, titled An Aborted Dinner Date, already gives us somewhat of an idea of what to expect throughout the rest of the series. The episode is about George wanting to bring together people with pro-life and pro-choice, so he schedules a publicity dinner. However, he later finds out that he has a dinner date with Laura on the same night. So George thinks he can just change the date of the publicity dinner. After old mate Carl over here tries to tell George that the leader of the pro-life organization was a he enters to then find out that the leader is a 30-year-old aborted fetus. Realizing that he can't cancel, he again goes back to Laura and tries to cancel their dinner, but old mate fictional George W. Bush over here is a giant pussy. We're then introduced to George's next door neighbor Larry, and he has an idea for George's dilemma.
Why don't you do both?
So George moves on ahead and goes forth with both dinners at the same time. After leaving Laura with a jazz band to drown out any noise coming from the other dinner,
If she does come out, you're gonna warn me. You're gonna make a loud crow call.
George rushes over to see our pal, the aborted fetus, have on a snazzy suit and to meet the leader of the pro-choice movement, Joyce.
Let me be frank.
Yeah, I think that makes more sense than Joyce.
Then shit goes off the rails. George, in his effort to try and please both sides and do a photo op, begins an argument between both sides. After mistakenly hearing a raven call, George rushes back to Laura with some food, with the subtlety of the band now playing the Jeopardy waiting theme. George then tries to keep things appearing okay, and it's about as you expect. George returns to see things haven't improved in the slightest, and it's only gone down from here. Then, in a stereotypical sitcom fashion, George stands up for everyone and now fully attempts to get the two politically distinct parties to now understand each other. Returning now to Laura just in the nick of time, Laura, let me reiterate in her own words, says, let's make love. And of course, she wants to make love in only one room, that being the dining room. What are the fucking odds? Laura runs off towards the dining room, but is thankfully stopped by George and Maggie, and George distracts her by telling her to change into something sexy, his words not mine. George returns to see the state of events, and as you can guess, it's a shit show. George interrupts said shit show and tries to get everyone to leave to the basement. After Joyce insults the Phoenix, he somehow fucking leaves and attacks her. Joyce then chucks him across the room for him to land on a conveniently placed dog. Everyone then runs out to chase it, and as they run through to the foyer, Laura comes out and unexpectedly flashes everyone, not expecting anyone besides George. The ending of the episode shows George and Laura together in bed, as George attempts to make amends and resolve the events that went down this whole episode, and it all ends on a good note.
All these days, Laura, I'm gonna punch you in the face!
Oh, yeah. Every episode in the series ends with this exact quote. It's a riff on Jackie Gleason's character from The Honeymooners. Now, the series itself only lasted 8 episodes, with the final episode airing on May 23rd, 2001. I'll talk more about the series finale in just a moment. However, the question is, why? Why did the show only last a season? There appeared to be some hope with a pretty good plot and a writing style that could be most certainly ironed out in future seasons. Well, it turns out that Comedy Central didn't cancel the series until August of 2001 due to the very high costs for producing an episode, with an estimated $1 million an episode in 2001. That being adjusted today with inflation to about $1.6 million an episode. Now, this is what I would consider the cheapest a sitcom's budget is, in terms of cable or even primetime. It doesn't mean it's bad, but for a network like Comedy Central at the time, it may have only made sense. In 2001, Comedy Central was still partially owned by both the newly formed AOL Time Warner, formerly under Time Warner, and Viacom International. By 2003, Viacom was able to buy out AOL Time Warner's half stake for about $1.23 billion. So for Comedy Central's size at the time, it couldn't justify doing a show like that for $1 million an episode. Other networks, particularly those that are primetime like CBS and NBC, in which sitcoms are typically their bread and butter, can justify the higher costs. Shows like How I Met Your Mother and Seinfeld had an estimated budget of around $2 million an episode. And of course, there are more expensive sitcoms out there. For example, Frasier had an estimated budget of around $5.2 million an episode. A big chunk of this, around $1.6 million, went to Kelsey Grammer's pay. And to cap this off, The Big Bang Theory's estimated budget for a certain time was about $9 million an episode. Now, this is mainly accredited to paying the salaries of the whole entire cast and the licensing fees to the Bare Naked Ladies for the show's theme song. Now, according to Trey and Matt, they personally believe that the show probably wouldn't have lasted past the September 11th terrorist attacks, saying that it wouldn't, quote, play well. And that's a pretty fair way to think. During production of the series finale, it was apparent to producers that the show would probably end due to its budget. So let's talk about that finale. Skipping over the other 6 episodes. How did That's My Bush end? It begins with his first appearance in the series, Dick Cheney.
Who's the president of the United States?
George Bush. Nah, I was just kidding. The real president of the United States is Dick Cheney. He's pulling all the strings.
Dick tries to push for George to leave office due to losing the Middle East Peace Treaty, among other crazy shit that happened earlier in the series. And he's kicked out of office. For now. Oh yeah, I love this. They added Dick Cheney's face over George's in the intro, and they changed up the song to say, "That's my dick." Quite a charming little edit for 2001. So, to try and be quick about this, George packs up everything and says his goodbyes, and then fades into another intro for Moving On Down, a riff on the 70s sitcom The Jeffersons. As they try to adjust to new living arrangements, things aren't going so well over at the White House. For example, they fired Maggie, and Dick, Mr. President, without beating around the bush, was being a dick. Back at George and Laura's apartment, George is trying to come to terms with his new life, and attempts to find a new career. Oh yeah, they tend to do this a lot in this episode. Now we're on Teach Me Mr. B, where George W. Bush is a high school teacher. After not being on the job for like a single minute, the students inject some whatever the fuck this Miralax chocolate shit is into an apple, and then the principal eats it and he fires him. George gets depressed and once again changes careers. Oh god damn it, it's another fucking intro, is George W. Bush is now working at Brew Ha Ha's as a bartender, and yet again, less than 10 seconds on the job, he tries to act like some douchey mixologist and breaks a bottle of gin. He's then fired after being the most unfunniest mixologist around. How pathetic.
Maybe I should get a corporate job.
Not another fucking cliche.
You know that it's Winnie Fencer.
George W.,
Yes, Mr. Banner.
take a memo. You're fired!
Fired!
Jesus. Okay, so fact of the day, fictional George W. Bush over here can't function in society. Charming. Back at the apartment as George eats a... a power cord and soup. His new neighbor Leron tells about a new job opportunity, wrestling. Meanwhile, back at the White House, Dick Cheney, Mr. President, is still settling into office and is already attempting to get a high approval rating. After telling the neighbor that he can dump his documents anywhere he likes, he storms off and the gang complain about how much life now sucks. Back to George's misadventures in life, we see him at a wrestling ring, ready to intentionally lose, and the exact opposite happens. Now changed to what a dick. Mr. President hopes that his first address to the nation was given a high rating, to only be beat by wrestling. What are the odds? So Mr. President conspires to host a wrestling event at the White House and bring over the mysterious loser. Turns out overnight, George W. Bush became a national wrestling sensation. Anyhow, Karl Rove shows up to give the mysterious loser an invite to the White House. Karl then proceeds to talk about George and remembering him fondly as president.
So I'm sure you stood by him when he was fired.
No, I didn't. I was too caught up with myself and my career. This country lost a good man. I lost a good friend.
He used to be president, now he's a wrestler.
You know what? I'll let this one pass. Mr. President, in an effort to be more noticed, asks the mysterious loser to reveal himself. After Mr. President revealed who the mysterious loser was, Larry comes in with some shocking fucking news. It turns out that Mr. President has shredded the peace treaty that George supposedly lost and thrown it in Larry's lawn. After that, George W. Bush is just magically reinstated as president, and we end on a good note.
Oh boy. What a whack at 2 days that was, huh?
Wait, hang on. This all transpired within 2 days? And that's my Bush. Mostly, of course, I only discussed 2 episodes. Now, thankfully, since I'm pretty sure Viacom or Sony Pictures Television doesn't really give 2 shits about the copyright of this particular series, it's actually been re-uploaded to the Internet Archive. If you want to watch it for yourself, the link will be down in the description. I also came across this video while researching by a content creator named Piley Benton, and that I haven't personally watched, but it was the only one I could find on the Sitcom. That will also be linked in the description below. All in all though, after watching through all 8 episodes, I personally found it to be quite enjoyable. I think it's mainly because as a sitcom fanatic, I find some of the stereotypical stuff quite humorous. I'll admit I was quite shocked about how many things I found funny, but however, it doesn't mean that if the series continued for much longer, it would probably get old quite fast. I think definitely a critique I could definitely throw down is how fake the supposed live studio audience is. So the show is actually never shot with a live studio audience, as to apparently keep control over the show and film scenes that would be difficult to shoot if it was shot live in front of an audience. It also appeared to not have been a ratings juggernaut. Its pilot episode premiered after South Park to an audience of about 2.9 million viewers, but after the premiere dropped to about 808,000 viewers per airing. However, this show now has a special place in my heart. It's hard to describe. Now, do I think this show needs to be rebooted? Hell no. I think the show is mostly crafted perfectly. It should be left in the past. Well, that was something. Maybe instead of Heil Honey I'm Home, I should watch The Secret Diary of Desmond Pfeiffer. The P is for some reason not silent. They say it in the intro.
The Secret Diary of Desmond Pfeiffer. The P isn't silent.
Really? It's Chi McBride, he's fucking awesome! Alright guys, fine. Heil Honey I'm Home it is, you fucking assholes. I've been The Confusing Opinion, giving out the most confusing opinions of all time. Now leave me alone.
Heil, honey. Heil, honey. Heil, honey. Heil, honey.
Hello.
I'm home.